All right, friends, welcome back to the Blessed Family Radio Show. So glad to be with you. God is so good. So excited about this new year. I love New Year's. I love debriefing the last year and looking forward and being excited about what God is going to do. My prayer every year is the same. God, may this year be the best year, be the most sanctified year, the most being conformed to the image of Christ, the most understanding year, the most transformative year we have as a family, as a church, as God's people. Well, today we're going to talk about something that is a question I get very often, especially at homeschool conventions, and that is, how do I get my kids excited about learning? Nothing is more frustrating than trying to teach and educate a child that doesn't want to be taught. And so I'm going to give you 7 practical tips, and I hope they help. Obviously, I'm going to go through them quickly because of our time. But let me just begin by saying this. If your child isn't excited about learning, home education or any education, this could be public and private as well, is always going to be an uphill, frustrating, and nagging experience. And this is kind of a rhetorical question, but you can't prod someone down the narrow path. You can prod someone to get their chores done, but you can't prod someone down the narrow path. The narrow path is something that is self-initiative or self-initiating. You have to want it. And so this is about giving our children a love and a hunger for education where instead of us having to prod them, they take the baton and they run, and we have a hard time keeping up with them. That's the prayer. Actually, let me give you 8 steps. Step 1, pray. We'll call it step 0 so I don't mess up my notes. Step 0, pray. Pray that God, I pray right now that you would work in my children's hearts and all these people's children's hearts, that they would want to learn, that they would see that true kingdom education and knowledge is freedom, power, beauty, sanctification, and to the glory of God. All right, friends, step 1 is to define the goal. Man, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. This is all about giving your child a biblical philosophy of education, which we've spoken of before. The goal of education is threefold. It's not about grades, diplomas, and careers, even though there's nothing wrong with those things, and God can use those things. But the goal of education in God's kingdom is about, number 1, godly character. Number 2, to know how to think critically. And number 3, to know how to learn whatever it is that God calls you to learn. Ultimately, the goal is to be a disciple of Christ. If someone claims to be educated and yet they are not growing in wisdom and knowledge and the glory of God, and they don't have character that is improving, then they haven't been educated. They've just been schooled a little bit. What we want for our children, what God wants for His church, is education, true discipleship. So we need to define the goal. And friends, in many ways, this is the most important. You can have a child pass a test. Think about this. You can have a child study for a test on ethics, make a 100, and walk away and not believe or put into practice anything they just passed. Right? So if we make the goal for our children grades, which I'm not saying grades are a bad thing, they can be a distraction. We have to make sure our children understand, just because our children take the classes and move forward in this climbing this ladder of education, that's not the goal. The goal is something that you can see manifested in the child's behavior. And we need to sit them down and explain this to them. Say, hey, because listen, if they think that the reason you're doing your schooling is just for grades, for instance, that's not as fulfilling. And see, also, once they graduate, then education's done. No, not at all. Education is from womb to tomb and beyond. And so we need to rightly define, say, hey, listen, son, daughter, there's a war raging. God has called our family to be in covenant with Him, and He wants you to take dominion for the glory of God. He wants you to be a victor. And to do that, you must be educated. Now, when that connects, now you have someone who wants to step up to the plate, right? Okay, so step 1, define the goal. Step 2, give them a love for learning. How do you do this? Well, people only love to learn if they see the benefit of what they're learning. This is very much related with the first point. For instance, you need to show them that attached with every skill is freedom. So, for example, let's see here. We think of skills. Usually you have academics and skills, but no, they're one and the same. Are you skilled in history? Are you skilled in writing? Are you skilled in reading? And to show them that God wants you to know how to think. And if you know how to write, it helps you know how to think. God wants you not to be duped by those who are attempting to dethrone God. Knowing history keeps you immune from many of those deceptions that they cast out. So once again, this is about giving our children a picture that's beyond what the state philosophy of education, the ceiling it's given, which is just about jumping through hoops. No, this is about the rest of your life. This is about eternity. This is about a cosmic battle between the forces of evil and darkness. I'm sorry, evil and God, between light and darkness. So we need to give them a love for learning. We need, listen, if by the grace of God our children love God, and if by the grace of God they want to become mature men and women, and if they see that education is becoming mature men and women, well, now they love it because they want it. They want the victory. They want the freedom. They want to be parents who raise up their children for the glory of God. So now they say, okay, I need this education. And also it helps you make sure that your education is in alignment with that. There's a good chance that there are things you're doing as an educator that really doesn't need to be done because it's not part of the big picture of taking dominion for the glory of God. All right, step 3. Here's a big one. Learn with your children. Show them that learning is lifelong. If you aren't excited to learn it, why should they be? Have you ever been teaching your kid something, teaching your child something, and they say, "Why do I need to know this?" Well, you need to give them an answer beyond, "Well, because I say so." And also, I'm willing to bet there are things that you want. This is a big point. There are things that you want your child to learn that you haven't learned. And man, talk about exciting. For instance, we have something that's been on our shelf. I said 2024 is the year we're going to do it. And it is the boot camp of, I don't know what it's called, Biblical Constitutional Liberty, some cool title like that. And it's by Patriot Academy, which is Rick Green's ministry. It's this maybe 8 DVD set. Well, I don't know that stuff very well, even though I've published a book called Christianity and Government, the Education That Brings Freedom. I want to know it. My kids want to know it, so we're going to learn it together. People ask me about my education. I tell them my education began when I started teaching my children. The amount of stuff I've learned in the last 12 years versus my first 18 years is an insane comparison. And now we're learning together, and it's fun. Well, usually it is. Sometimes it's hard. I mean, these are, please don't think that we've got this mastered. With some kids, it's easier than others. All right, step 4, give them a love for books. I can remember the Hardens. He has a science curriculum called Science Shepherd. Check it out. Dr. Scott Harden, I pastored his family up in Wisconsin. We're going to be back up there, by the way, this April, speaking at the Wisconsin State Homeschool Convention in Wisconsin Dells. Would love to see you. But I was talking to him over a dozen years ago, and I was talking to his wife. I said, give me just the main step for homeschooling. You've raised your 6 kids. They're awesome. I'm raising kids. I want my kids to have the experience your kids. Just give me one main goal. And Mrs. Harden said, give them a love for reading and give them the right books. And friends, our oldest is now 18. It's true. It works. It's a big deal. Like that is easily over 50% of the best advice I could give you is give them a love for reading and give them the right books. Okay, how do you give your child a love for reading? Well, it's exhausting because when they're young, you read to them every day and you read to them a lot. And for mamas especially, because this falls on them mostly, dads need to share in this. But it's exhausting because you're tired and the kids are there, but they want to read and you just keep going. It's funny, here on my desk right now, I've got books like this, which Berenstain Bears might not be the best stuff to read because they make the dad out to be an absolute dope. But find some good books. Oh, here's one. American Girl short stories, right? Sit down. Of course, this wouldn't be for young kids. This might be for a 7-year-old. But man, when your kids are 1, 2, 3, 4, sit down, snuggle up with them. Well, all ages. Read aloud to them. Read good books to them. And when you do that, and you turn off the screen as much as possible. Look, if you want your kids to have a love for video games, no problem. Buy the video game system of your choice and let them play it often. Play it with them, and they'll love it. They'll be addicted to it. Well, just use that principle. Don't do that, by the way, but do it with books. Okay? Do it with books. Read to them every day. Take away the competition, like video games, and give them the right books. All right, check this out. When I walk into the home of young men and women who love reading, you know what they never say to me? Yet. I haven't heard this once. I've never had them say, Mr. Dodd, come look at these textbooks. No, usually the textbooks are what their family is throwing away. I'm not saying textbooks are horrible. I've just never heard a son or daughter say, ooh, this textbook right here. Oh, I just love this textbook. Now, source books, like the real books that the textbooks are based off of, very often they're like, oh, Mr. Dodd, check out this book. This is the book Luther by Eric Metaxas. This book is awesome. Or Mr. Dodd, come look at this book. It's, this classic, The Count of Monte Cristo. I love this book. So I'm not saying textbooks are worthless. I can count on one hand the number we have out of our thousands of books. But I'm just saying education today is primarily textbooks. And if you want your kid to get excited about books, get them real books, something to think about. All right, number 5, moving along. Give your children the right heroes. Here's a great quote. Show me your child's heroes and I will show you his future. If his hero is an athlete, he'll be excited about sports. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just making the point. If his hero is Winston Churchill, he will be excited about reading books. My family loves Churchill. My eldest son, Jared, is a big fan of Winston Churchill, and he has read from cover to cover Winston Churchill's History of the English-Speaking People. It's a lot there. But he read it because he loves Churchill. If your hero is Davy Crockett, you'll be excited about history. If it's Gladys Aylward, you'll be excited about missions. Isaac Newton, science. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, theology. Elizabeth Elliot, femininity and purity. Give them the right heroes. Instead of the movie stars, I'm not saying there aren't any movie stars out there that might not warrant to be a hero, but instead of the movie stars and even the athletes, that's fine. But man, give them heroes and heroines from history. The missionaries, the statesmen, the pioneers, the wilderness folk, the authors, the composers, the biblical characters, the priests, the monks, the explorers, Lewis and Clark, people like that. All right, number 6, make learning fun. Make learning fun. We spoke about this in, I think, our last podcast, but take trips. Instead of homeschool or public school or private school, road school for a couple weeks. Take them around the nation. Take them up to, you know where I love to go, and people underestimate this place, is whenever I don't prepare with names, it stumps me. Mount, oh my goodness, this is really embarrassing. Rushmore, thank you. Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore, I love that place. People look at pictures, they say, oh, it's just a picture. It's just 4 faces on a wall. Man, you go there, you get the tour, you go up close, you look up there, and you look at these men who were definitely not perfect men. No one is perfect than Christ. Some of those men I take issue with, but I still have great respect for them and the history that they represent, and we learn from them. This would be making, how else can you make learning fun? Do a project. Do a fun science project. If you're studying force, okay, get your AR-15 and convert it where it shoots Coke cans. We just went to a birthday party where they had this, and talk about equations or whatever, force, and shoot something. Board games. There's some very great educational board games out there, like the history of the world, things like that. Find teachers they enjoy. If they want to learn literature, which they should want to learn. Wes Callahan, right? Romans Road Media. What's it called? Old Western Culture. Check that out. Once again, resources are 80% of the battle. And also when it comes to making learning fun, and I say this to moms and dads, but especially probably moms, this falls on more, be sensitive with curriculum. What do I mean by that? I always get in trouble when I say this, but I'm just going to say it because I believe it. If you disagree, let me know. Make a comment on it. These curriculums, they want to sell, right? I mean, they have something they're trying to market, and they want you to buy their curriculum. And sometimes they think the more things they have, the better it's going to sound, the more appealing it's going to be. And so some of these curriculums, you look at them and they say in a given day, you're supposed to do all of this stuff. And moms come to me at homeschool conventions. They say, what curriculum would you recommend? And I have some I like more than others, but I'm really not that educated on that. I say, look, whatever curriculum you choose, don't do everything they say you're supposed to do. In some instances, do half. Like if you try and do everything they say in a day, you are going to drive you and your family absolutely crazy, in my personal strong opinion. These curriculums are not Lord. They are not the boss. They are a tool, and you are the boss. Jesus is Lord. You are the boss of your home, and you call the shots. And so you can take or choose. You say, okay, this is what they recommend. Scratch that. For instance, foreign language. So I'm fluent in Spanish. I took 3 years of high school Spanish, and then I went to Mexico. And in 3 weeks in Mexico, I learned more than I learned in the 3 years of Spanish. So, I mean, you just need to count the cost. You need to be wise about this. Some of the projects they say to do, it's just a little too much. And if you try this curriculum and you're exhausted, your kids are exhausted, it's not fun. Please, please get a Sharpie and start marking stuff off and focus on doing a few things well. All right, last but not least, let's wrap this up with a pretty bow. Make the child the priority, not the education. Wow, this is a big one. If you're educating your children and your goal is, goodness, how can I say this? Your goal is what others think, you might drive, or your goal, once again, is to do what the curriculum says. I've given you this example over and over, but it's the best one. The mom, and this is true stories, multiple times. The mom calls, she's frustrated because the daughter is not understanding the trigonometry, and they're frustrated, they're mad at each other, Satan is just getting involved, and it's just World War III. Well, what's the goal? If the goal is the child and if the goal is the education, you need to reevaluate, is this something they really need? Is this a big deal? I mean, are we doing this because we know it's what our child needs? Or are we doing this because this book says so? And not just that, but am I okay? For instance, I have some kids now who they're not where their siblings were. They're built differently, and we're waiting a little bit. Now, my pride could really mess that up, and I can make the goal my pride instead of the child's education. Don't assume your child needs what others say they need. The goal is to disciple, educate, and equip your child for life. And that's going to look different for each child. The goal isn't to get 100% all the time or to take every class. The goal is to develop each child individually to be the man and woman that God wants them to be. It's going to look different. Now, modern education is just a cookie cutter thing where everyone gets the same stuff. That's not the way it is in God's kingdom, in my personal opinion. All right, so review. This is all about getting your children excited. Number 1, define the goal. Number 2, give them a love for learning and pray. Pray that God would give them a love for learning. I have some kids that's easy, and other kids it's not. And I don't want to cripple them. You know, it says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Don't be too harsh with them. Those are the 2 do nots in the New Testament for fathers. What does that tell you? That's the propensity. Like, that's the norm, is for us to be too harsh, for us to crush them. We have to be careful. Number 3, learn with your children. Learn together as a family. Say, hey, do you guys want to learn this? Let's do it. And then they see, oh, wow, this isn't just about like grade school. This is about mom, dad. This is about disciple. This is about family learning. Number 4, give them a love for books. That's a big one. Number 5, give your children the right heroes. Heroes are huge. Heroes are huge. Number 6, make learning fun. Be creative. Have fun. Have fun with it. If it's not fun, if they're not enjoying it, for the most part, I mean, look, there's some days it's like, look, I know you don't want to write this paper. Sit down and write it. This is life. There's going to be times that you don't want to go to work. You're going to go to work. Sit down and do it. But for the most part, overall, if they aren't excited and if it's not enjoyable and if there's not joy in it, if education is not filled with joy, then what makes you think they're going to want to continue to be educated as a disciple of Christ once they leave the home? And lastly, make your child the priority, not the education. The priority is the child. To be the disciple that God wants them to be. And you know what? Let me just close with some really good news. You and I are going to fall short. Now, don't use this as an excuse or license, but you and I are going to fall short. Give it everything you got and trust the grace of God to make up for what's lacking. To His glory. All right, friends, I hope this helps. Please reach out to us, comment below. We are full-time missionaries for you. You can see more about our ministry at jareddodd.com. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.